problem. It is a joy to join you today and be able to speak to you. Just a little bit about myself. First off, I want to thank Father Stephen and the Parish Council for allowing me to come out and be a part of this. I've been blessed to come to St. Paul's a few times in the past, and it's always a joy and it's always an honor, but it is always me waking up at 4 o'clock thinking it's 7. My background is not in the Greek Orthodox Church. I was born and raised in the American South. I'm Southern by the grace of God, American by birth. Raised in a Pentecostal world. Wanted to be a preacher since I could remember. While the other kids were playing with G.I. Joes, I was pretending to be Billy Graham in the basement and holding services. I eventually got my dream to be a Pentecostal pastor in a growing church in Atlanta, Georgia. But as the years went by, my best friend and myself began to question whether there was more to the Christian life than just the emotional experiences that we've been experiencing in our Pentecostal background. My best friend Rod and I loved church history, so we began to read, and we found out that there was a group of people called the Orthodox. And I looked at Rod and I said, Rod, have you ever seen one of these people before? He said, no. I said, well, do you think they're still around? Well, come on, folks. It's not like y'all were trying to come find us, for heaven's sake. We'll talk about that later. A long story short, after a 10-year journey, my best friend Rod and his family and my family and 20 families from the church I was pastoring entered the Orthodox Church in November of 2001. In 2006, I moved to Boston. 2007, I moved to Boston to go to seminary. In 2009, I was ordained a deacon, and 2010, I was ordained a priest and became the parish priest of Saints Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene Greek Orthodox Church in Cumming, Georgia. A congregation that had about 32 families. And now, after about 14 and a half years, we have 168 families, and we're 75% convert. We're now in a building program to build our very first building on 17 acres of land that we own. And when we build it, we'll be able to seat 400, and when we walk in the door that first day, we'll be full. We're in the process of preparing 33 families to be received into the Orthodox Church this year when it comes time for Pascha. 33 families is a little bit better than last year. We only did 26 last year. And the year before that, during COVID, we had almost 40 families enter the Orthodox Church. And no, I have no idea where I'm going to put them. I did threaten that I was going to Velcro some of them to the ceiling if they didn't start coming up with the cash to build this building. The story of our parish is the story of Orthodoxy around the country. More and more people, especially during the pandemic, had a chance to look around. And what we're discovering is that men and women in the United States who are spiritually seeking are being touched by the power of Orthodox Christianity. And it isn't because they're looking for something old, because there's some things that are old that aren't worth a flip. And by the way, if I sound like I have a southern accent, it's because I practiced before I got up here this morning. It isn't because it's old. It isn't because Orthodoxy is somehow more relevant and with it today. Do they still say with it? No, we don't say with it. I'm sorry. Orthodox Christianity is touching something in men and women across the country precisely because there is an element of orthodoxy. No, excuse me. The element of orthodoxy is that it is timeless. It isn't old. It isn't new and improved. I always tease my Pentecostal friends. They have their smoke machines. We have our censer. Ours smells better. But why is it that timelessness is touching the hearts of modern day Americans in a society that is more and more nihilistic, more and more narcissistic, and more gripped by the pandemic psychological problem of loneliness? What's going on here? Why is Orthodoxy, this very old and, hey, listen, by the way, very, very different kind of prayer and worship, why is it touching and reaching out to Americans? Because, brothers and sisters, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter when you are, no matter where you're from, the fact of the matter is you're created in the image of God. And being in the image of God, that means that timelessness is your normal situation. You're meant, in fact, sometimes this is good news, sometimes it's bad news, you're going to live forever. Jesus Christ has conquered death. We sing it every Pascha. You may have showed up a time or two. Christos anesti. Christ, notice what we say. Christ is risen. The defeat of mortality means that none of the human beings that have lived, are living, or ever will live will ever be dead forever. You're going to live forever. The only issue to be settled is, will you know how to enjoy it? And Orthodox Christianity is the perfect spiritual science to train a human being to become by grace what Christ is by nature. This is the place to learn how to enjoy living forever. I usually don't preach from notes, but I wanted to make sure I got this quote right. A man by the name of R.J. Snell, he wrote a book called Acedia and Its Discontents. I love this byline. It says, Metaphysical Boredom in an Empire of Desire. Isn't that cool? He said this, we simply do not know why we exist, and we hate any answer, watch this, that might compel us to limit our empty freedom and actually attain the good. Freedom is for us now an idol, and our conception of freedom is so absolute that we increasingly perceive limits, watch this, we increasingly perceive limits, especially in this society, as illicit and impermissible. It is forbidden in our modern society to forbid. In that cultural situation, in that cultural rot, if I may, in that cultural illness, we are raising a generation of young men and young women who don't know why they're here. Why do you think the chaos of identity is rampant throughout modern society? In our society where we're the most technologically connected that we've ever been in the history of the human race, and yet the number one problem, according to the CDC, is the symptom and the sickness of loneliness in our society. Our young people questioning, who in the world am I? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do? In that context and in that situation, I make a bold claim that Orthodox Christianity, yep, that Orthodox Christianity, is absolutely the essential answer and medicine for men and women to become by grace what Christ is by nature. And ladies and gentlemen, a human life is going to be lived too small if it's less than that reality. You were made for God. You were made to know God. You were made to be like Jesus Christ. Well, Father, that's a little bit more than Yaya's baklava recipe. You better believe it. Why do you think this is so comprehensive? Why do you think that this faith is so intrusive in your life? Man, it even affects my diet. It affects how and when I eat. It affects what I think and how I live. And every aspect of my life is informed and educated so that I might learn how to live forever with joy. It's the reason why the Apostle Paul, today we celebrate his name day, and we say Kronia Pala to you precious folks at St. Paul's. It's the reason why the Apostle Paul could dare to say to the Galatians, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live. Yet it is not I that lives, but it is Christ that lives inside of me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, that's this stuff. I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. The reason why a Pentecostal pastor would end up wearing a dress and being a Greek Orthodox priest is because in fact, I remember I told my dad, he was brokenhearted. He said, son, what are you doing? I said, Dad, I'm becoming Orthodox. Son, why would you become Jewish? Oh, come on, it's not like you haven't heard that before. No, Dad, Orthodox Christian. What is that? I know. The best kept secret in America, God help us, God forgive us. The reason why a Pentecostal pastor would give up everything that he understood, everything that was normal to him, and enter the Orthodox Christian faith is because I told my dad, I said, Dad, I finally found a faith large enough for the dignity of the human soul. Now I know why I'm here. Now I know why I have my life given to me by God. My life has been given to me so that I might learn to become by grace what Christ is by nature, and the Orthodox Christian faith is the university for eternal life. And that central reality is the reason why the Apostle Paul today reveals to us three eternal truths that are perfectly preserved in our precious, timeless, Orthodox Christian faith. And interestingly enough, and young people, I want you to hear this. All three of these eternal truths are dead set centered on Jesus Christ. It isn't a religious philosophy. It's not a religious opinion. It's not another religious self-help rule. It's not Tony Robbins with Jesus added to it. It is the perfect medicine to train a human how to overcome their passions, to stop being a slave to their desires, and to learn how to become like Jesus Christ by focusing solely and centered on Jesus Christ himself. The first eternal truth that the Apostle Paul reveals to us is the eternal truth that Christ is risen. Isn't that interesting? We don't put it in the past tense. We don't put it in the future tense. We put it in the present tense, because the reality is that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so potent and so powerful that it not only affects the past, it affects the present, and it affects the future. That one moment on the day when Christ rose from the dead actually changes the entire universe. And the message that Jesus Christ is alive is the central message of the Orthodox Christian faith. This is the reason why we have our churches decorated like this. It's why we do incense and candles, and why we have a censer, and the priest is dressed in these lovely robes. Because the message is communicated to you in both verbal and nonverbal ways so that you can't mistake the truth. The resurrection of Jesus Christ changes everything. And I'm not talking about just resurrecting in our hearts and our memories and, oh, don't we recall him with love? No, folks. The heartbeat that stopped on Friday on Calvary's cross started beating again on Sunday morning. That's the claim we make. Father, that is so absolutely unscientific. Well, you science folks ain't doing so hot nowadays. Timeless truths don't depend on temporary fads. The resurrection of Jesus changes everything. He lives not for himself, but for me. He lives freely so that I can live freely. There's a wonderful statement in the movie Shawshank Redemption. I love that movie. One of the fellas says you got to get busy living or get busy dying. The resurrection of Jesus Christ offers you a chance to choose life instead of the perpetual death of the slavery to the modern madness of addictions and desires that lead me around by the nose and make me a slave and an addict to things both physical and emotional and psychological. Jesus Christ offers me life, and it changes everything. The second eternal truth that the Apostle Paul tells us today in Galatians is that the eternal truth that not only is Christ risen from the dead, but Christ is crucified. Wait a second, Father, you got it backwards. I want to talk to you about the power of the death of Jesus Christ to invite you to die to that which is enslaving you to a too small life. Let's face it, folks. There must be a reason why in the wealthiest country that has ever existed in the history of the human race, we got more stuff than we know what to do with. Did you know that one of the biggest businesses in the United States today is storage facilities? Why? We got so much stuff, we got to rent a place to put the other stuff, and now and again we'll go by and visit it. This is my stuff. I have this stuff. Why do you have it? Well, I just have it. In this wealthy, abundant society, the most educated, the most technologically advanced, and yet the reality is we are gripped by constant loneliness to the point that the number one prescription in the United States are antidepressants. My angels! If money is going to make us happy, if education is going to make us happy, if stuff is going to make us happy, we should be the most deliriously silly folks on the planet. But something is missing. We're invited by the death of Jesus Christ to die to that which is killing us. Don't be a slave. You don't have to. And by living in his death, in fact, he said, the Apostle Paul says, I am crucified with Christ. Let me ask you a question. Have you been crucified with Christ? Are you willing to die to that which is too small in your life? Are you willing to die to the madness that keeps you locked away in the slavery of your own narcissistic self-centeredness? Are you willing to die to that which is killing your relationships, destroying your marriages, hurting your children, keeping you enslaved to a mindset that sends you off to make tons of money and sacrifice your home life? Are you willing to die to what is killing you? A wise man would be happy to do that. Christ not only is risen, Christ not only is crucified, but Christ is love. Now, make no mistake, my angels. This is not the love that we have foolishly fallen for in our modern society. The love that we see portrayed so often in front of us is a love that is conditional. I'll love you if you love me back. I'll love you as long as you make me happy. I was telling the folks yesterday that I had a man come into my office one time, and he wanted me to give him permission to leave his family. And you know what he said to me? Do you know what he said to me? He said to me, with his mouth, he said this to me. He looked at me in the face. Here I am sitting there. I've got a collar on. I've got my black dress on. I look great. We're sitting in my office. It's right connected to the church. The guy looked at me, and this is what he said. He said this with his mouth. Father, don't I deserve to be happy? The gentleman will never forget what happened next. I rose up in all my glory and in my glorious robes flowing in the breeze. And I looked at that narcissistic idiot. I say that with love. I look at that narcissistic, self-centered man who is only concerned about himself, and I looked at him and said, no, of course you don't deserve to be happy. You deserve to be good. Happiness is too small to build a life on. Happiness can be taken away from me when somebody cuts me off in traffic. That's too small a thing to build an entire life on. Too small. Not bad, not wrong. It's lovely to be happy. I enjoy being happy. But I like what C.S. Lewis said. If I wanted to be happy, I knew a bottle of port could do that. No, angels, you were created for something much more cosmic. You were created for an eternal reality. And happiness is here today and gone tomorrow. You can catch a cold and not be happy anymore. If something is that flimsy that can be affected by so many external circumstances that you have no control over, how in heaven's name can you logically, as an adult, now I understand if you're 3, but if you're a grown human being, how in heaven's name can you get away with spending the life gift that God has given you looking for something as flimsy as happiness? No, my angels, Christ is love. And this love is a terrifying reality. This love says, I will love God without reservation, and I will love my neighbor expecting nothing in return. What? You mean you may be sitting there wondering, where's the payoff? It ain't here. This love is a love that sets me free from the temporary tyranny of that which enslaves me through my desires and my passions. Young people especially, you live in a day and an age where the world is telling you, follow your heart. That has shipwrecked more lives than any foolish stupidity in the history of the world. Don't follow your heart, follow Christ. Now danger, folks. Amen to me is like sick 'em to a dog. Don't do that. We got to get to dinner. Following Christ is better than following your heart. Why? Because King David said that my heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? My heart can be deceived. My heart can be lied to. But Christ is firm and sure and everlasting. And on this St. Paul's feast day, you and I are interested in learning how to be timeless, because that's why we were made. And the only way we're going to ever learn how to truly be the timeless beings, and I love again what C.S. Lewis said, I'm looking at a group of people right now that in 1,000 years you will be so beautiful I will be tempted to fall down and worship you, or so hideous that I will recoil in terror. Because right now in this building, right now in this church, at this moment in Orange County, California, you are already becoming what you will eventually be. The question is, what is that? And on this feast day, the invitation of the timeless, genius Orthodox Christian faith to you right now. You are invited to put your foot on a transformational journey by focusing on Jesus Christ, who is risen, crucified, and loves you more than you yourself know how to love. On this precious day, all moments are in this moment right now. And you will leave this building either choosing to grasp the greatest adventure that could ever be promised to a human being, or you will once again turn away from the glorious opportunity to be made by the science of orthodoxy into a person who is like Jesus Christ. So, who is on the Lord's side among you? Amen.